Marianne Carter was in the cereal aisle when her phone buzzed. Nothing about that moment felt important at first. It was just another weekday evening, just another grocery run. Just another list in her head. The kind of list she had carried for more than 20 years without anyone ever asking how heavy it was. Chicken for dinner, milk, paper towels, Caleb's cereal. Her 15-year-old son had been eating the same kind since middle school, and for some reason, that small detail made her smile as she reached for the box. Then her phone buzzed again. A bank alert. At first, Marianne barely frowned. Maybe the card reader had glitched somewhere. Maybe a bill had posted early. Maybe the bank was doing that annoying fraud check it did every few months. She had seen enough alerts over the years not to panic at the first one. But this one felt off. She opened the banking app right there in the aisle, one hand still resting on the cereal shelf. The declined charge was not hers. The cardholder name was Vanessa Lane. Marianne stared at that name for a few seconds, waiting for her mind to catch up with what her eyes had already seen. Vanessa Lane. Not Richard. Not Caleb. Not a vendor she recognized. Not a household bill. A woman's name. A woman Marianne did not know. A woman with a card attached to an account Marianne had spent years managing. The charge had come from a luxury spa across town. Not a gas station. Not a grocery store. Not a pharmacy. Not something that could be explained away as a family emergency or a billing mistake. A spa. For a moment, the whole store seemed to fade around her. She could hear the soft rattle of another cart rolling behind her. She could hear a child asking for cookies 2 aisles over. She could hear the hum of the freezer section. And still, all she could see was that name. Vanessa Lane. Then Marianne scrolled. That was when the real damage began. There was rent for an apartment she had never seen. Furniture from a store Richard once claimed was too expensive when Marianne wanted to replace their worn-out dining chairs. Restaurants she had never been taken to. Car insurance for a vehicle that was not parked in their driveway. A second phone bill. Salon charges. Parking fees near a downtown building Richard had no reason to visit that often. And then there was one transfer. $7,500. The memo line was only 4 words. For our new place. Marianne read it once. Then again. Then a third time, slower. For our new place. That was the sentence that ended the marriage. Not a confession. Not lipstick on a collar. Not a midnight phone call with a woman whispering on the other end. A bank memo. Richard had not only betrayed her. That would have been painful enough. He had used money from the life she helped hold together to build another one with someone else. Her money. Their household money. Money that should have gone toward Caleb's therapy, the mortgage, the car fund, the dishwasher that had been grinding for months, and the college account Richard liked to brag about at parties. Instead, it had gone to Vanessa Lane. For a few seconds, Marianne stood there with that cereal box in her hand, realizing something quiet and brutal. Her marriage had not ended in a screaming match. It had ended in a bank statement. She took screenshots, one after another. The spa charge, the apartment payments, the phone bill, the memo line. Then she put the phone back in her purse and reached for the cereal Caleb liked. Because Marianne had been a wife long enough to know when a reaction would only give a liar time to clean up his mess. If one small detail has ever made you question everything you thought you knew about a person, stay with this story. And if you want more stories about betrayal, divorce, evidence, and the kind of quiet justice that does not need to shout, subscribe before we go any further. Marianne Carter was 52 years old, and she had never been the kind of woman people noticed first when she walked into a room. She was not loud. She was not flashy. She did not need to win every conversation. She did not post every dinner, every holiday, every little good thing online to prove her life had value. She was practical. Sometimes too practical, if you ask Richard. She kept receipts and labeled envelopes. She knew which grocery store marked down meat on Wednesday mornings. She knew when the car registration was due before the reminder ever came in the mail. She remembered the roof warranty, the insurance deductible, Caleb's school passwords, and the antibiotic that had made him break out in hives when he was 7. There are people who call that boring. Usually, they are the same people who panic the minute boring stops protecting them. Marianne was not perfect. She could be stubborn. She could go quiet when she should have spoken sooner. She could turn pain into a list because lists felt safer than falling apart. But she was steady, and for most of her life, steady had been enough. She married Richard Carter when she was 28. Back then, there was nothing impressive about their life except the hope inside it. They were not rich. They were barely comfortable. They had one used car, one small apartment, and a kitchen table Richard's brother helped them carry up 3 flights of stairs because they could not afford delivery. Still, they had plans. Not fantasy plans. Ordinary ones. The kind that look small from the outside but mean everything when you are young and building. Buy a house. Have a child. Pay down debt. Save a little. Make holidays feel warm. Grow old in a place that felt like theirs. For a while, it looked like that was exactly what they were doing. Richard worked his way into sales management at a medical equipment company. He was good at it, too. That was the part Marianne never denied. Richard could talk to anyone. He had the smile, the handshake, the easy confidence that made clients feel like they were the only people in the room. His income grew faster than hers. At first, Marianne was proud of him, truly proud. She told people he had earned it, and she meant every word. After Caleb was born, Marianne worked part-time in bookkeeping. It was not glamorous work, but she liked numbers. Numbers told the truth if you knew how to read them. They did not flatter you. They did not gaslight you. They did not come home late smelling like a different life. The job also gave her enough flexibility to handle the things no one claps for. School pickups, doctor visits, insurance calls, forms, permission slips, grocery runs, parent meetings, therapy appointments, the quiet maintenance of a family. Richard made more money on paper, but Marianne kept the house alive. She paid the mortgage before the grace period. She kept track of property taxes, health insurance, grocery budgets, car repairs, school deadlines, and the college savings account Richard loved mentioning in front of other people, but rarely remembered to fund on time. She knew Caleb's teachers by name. She knew which parent portal password worked, and which one Richard had forgotten again. She knew how long they could delay replacing the dishwasher if they stopped eating out for a while. She knew when the tires were getting thin, and when the water heater sounded wrong. Richard called that worrying. Marianne called it keeping a family from falling apart. Over the years, Richard started saying certain things that sounded harmless if you only heard them once. The problem was, Marianne heard them for years. "I handle the real money," he would say. "You just keep the house running." The first time, Marianne laughed because she thought it was a joke. The second time, she corrected him. The third time, she let it pass because Caleb had a fever. Dinner was burning, and Richard had that tone in his voice that meant any disagreement would turn into an hour of punishment. After a while, the words became part of the marriage. Ugly, familiar, always there. They hurt her. Of course they did. There's a particular kind of pain in being dismissed by someone who benefits from your labor every single day. But Marianne had been married long enough to know that not every wound gets a courtroom speech. Sometimes you swallow the hurt because the child still needs dinner. The mortgage still needs paying. The laundry still needs moving from the washer before it smells sour. Tomorrow comes whether you sleep or not. So she told herself marriage did not need a winner. If Caleb was safe, if the house was warm, if the bills were paid, if the family stayed together, then maybe that was what love looked like after 24 years. Not fireworks. Not poetry. Just showing up. Richard seemed to believe something different. As his income rose, so did his confidence. Not the good kind. Not the quiet pride of a man grateful for what he had built. It was polished confidence. Performed confidence. He bought sharper suits. Changed his cologne. Started caring more about watches, shoes, haircuts, and the angle of himself in the mirror before work. Then came the client dinners. At first, they were occasional. Once a month, maybe. Then twice. Then every week. Then often enough that Marianne stopped asking what time he would be home, because the answer always came wrapped in irritation. "You know how this works," he would say. "Successful men have obligations. Successful men." That phrase started showing up more and more. Like Richard had joined some private club where wives were expected to stand outside and feel grateful. When Marianne asked simple questions, he made them sound small. If she asked about a late charge, he said she was nervous. If she asked about a dinner receipt, he said she was suspicious. If she asked why he missed one of Caleb's school meetings, he said she did not understand pressure. Pressure was Richard's favorite excuse. It covered everything. His temper, his absence, his spending, his tone, his habit of making Marianne feel like a woman who had no right to ask about the life she was helping pay for. Once, at a backyard barbecue, Richard smiled at another couple and said Marianne was practical to the point of boring. Everyone laughed because people laugh when a husband insults his wife gently enough. Marianne smiled too. That is what you do when your husband cuts you in public with a clean little blade. You smile so no one sees the blood. Later that night, she told him it embarrassed her. Richard looked at her like she had handed him a chore. Oh, come on, he said. You know I'm kidding. Don't turn everything into a wound. That was Richard's gift. He could say something cruel, then make her feel childish for noticing. He could bruise her in front of people, then act exhausted when she asked him to stop. After enough years of that, Marianne stopped bringing those moments up. Not because they stopped hurting. They did not. She just got tired of defending the fact that she had feelings. She chose peace because she had spent too many years cleaning up after conflict. That did not make her weak. It made her tired. There is a difference. And when a woman spends decades holding a family steady, people often mistake her quiet for blindness. Richard made that mistake too. He just had no idea how expensive it would become. The red flags did not burst into the room all at once. They slipped in slowly. A little water under a door. Easy to ignore at first. Hard to deny once the floor starts to warp. Richard began talking about money differently. Not openly. Not honestly. Dramatically. The company was tightening budgets, he said. Bonuses were uncertain. Clients were pulling back. The economy was strange. People were nervous. Everyone had to be careful. Every conversation came back to sacrifice. And somehow, every sacrifice belonged to Marianne and Caleb. Caleb's guitar lessons were suddenly too expensive. The better insurance plan was no longer realistic. The dishwasher could wait. The used car they had been saving for, the one Caleb would eventually need for school and a part-time job, had to be pushed back again. Richard made it sound mature. We need to be adults, he told her one night, standing in the kitchen with a glass of bourbon in his hand. We can't keep pretending money just appears. Marianne looked at him for a long second. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because money had never just appeared. She knew that better than anyone. She had stretched it, tracked it, moved it, protected it, and cleaned up every careless decision Richard dressed up as a business expense. Still, she tried to believe him. That was the sad part. Even when a woman knows something feels wrong, love and history can make her give the lie one more chance. Then the numbers started whispering. A cash withdrawal here, a restaurant charge there, a parking garage payment that repeated every month near a luxury apartment building downtown. A second phone bill under a vendor name Marianne did not recognize. Charges from boutiques Richard had no reason to visit. At first, each thing had a possible explanation. That is how men like Richard survive as long as they do. They count on every clue looking too small to fight over by itself. But clues have a way of gathering. One afternoon, Marianne opened the trunk of Richard's car to put away a bag of donations and found a small velvet jewelry box tucked under a folded jacket. She stood there for a moment, staring at it, not touching it, just looking. When she asked him about it later, Richard did not even pause. That's for a client, he said. Older woman. Big account. You wouldn't understand how relationship management works. There it was again. You wouldn't understand. Those 4 words were Richard's favorite locked door. The more Marianne questioned, the more offended Richard became by the question itself. He rarely answered directly. He turned the whole room around until she was the problem, standing in the middle of it. One evening, after she asked about a restaurant charge on a night he claimed to be in another city, he leaned back in his chair and gave her that tired, superior look she had come to hate. This is why I don't talk finances with you, he said. You see one number and invent a whole crime scene. He said it like she had failed some test of maturity. Marianne felt the old sting rise in her chest. Not just anger. Shame. That was the poison in Richard's tone. He knew how to make a reasonable question feel like emotional weakness. So she backed away. Richard noticed. And because men like Richard often confuse silence with permission, he got bolder. He came home later after that. Not all at once. Richard was too careful for that. At first it was 15 minutes, then 40. Then whole evenings that disappeared behind phrases like client dinner, emergency call, last-minute meeting. And you know how this business works. His phone started living face down on the counter. That was new. For years, Richard had left it wherever he dropped it. Kitchen island, bathroom sink, recliner, passenger seat of Marianne's car. He used to ask her to read him texts while he drove. He used to hand it to Caleb when Caleb wanted to check a game score. Then suddenly, the screen was always turned over. If it rang, Richard picked it up and walked into the garage. If Marianne entered the room while he was talking, his voice dropped. If she asked who it was, he gave her a look that made the question sound dirty. "Do I ask who you talk to all day?" he said once. Marianne almost answered him. She almost said, "No, because I'm usually talking to your son's school, the insurance company, the pharmacy, or the plumber you forgot to call." But she swallowed it. That was becoming a habit. Swallow the answer. Swallow the insult. Swallow the feeling that something was wrong. Because every time she brought it up, Richard made her feel like the wrong thing in the room. At the same time, he became strangely generous outside the home, and strangely strict inside it. Caleb needed new shoes for school, and Richard sighed like the family was standing at the edge of financial ruin. 2 nights later, a charge appeared at an upscale restaurant for 2 people. Caleb's therapy copay was too much, Richard said. They had to be realistic. Everyone had to make adjustments. But that same Friday, a hotel bar downtown showed up on the account. The dishwasher made that grinding sound again, louder this time. Marianne asked if they should finally replace it before it flooded the kitchen. Richard said they should wait. "We're not made of money," he told her. That line stayed with her. They were not made of money when Caleb needed help. They were not made of money when the house needed repairs. They were not made of money when Marianne asked for something practical. But somehow, money existed for places Richard never mentioned. The pattern became harder to ignore. First, Richard created fear around money. Then he pushed Marianne to cut the things that kept home stable. Then that money seemed to move somewhere else. And when she noticed, he acted as if noticing made her unstable. That was not just lying. It was preparation. Richard was building a version of Marianne before she even knew she needed to defend herself. Marianne was controlling. Marianne was paranoid. Marianne did not understand business. Marianne made simple things difficult. Marianne turned numbers into accusations. If the marriage ever cracked open, Richard wanted the first story already planted. He wanted people to believe she had broken it with suspicion. The cruelest moment came through Caleb. It was a Thursday evening. Marianne was rinsing a pan at the sink, and Caleb came into the kitchen with his backpack still hanging from one shoulder. He had that quiet look teenagers get when they are trying not to care about something that hurt them. "Mom," he said, "Dad forgot the conference again." Marianne turned off the water. "What conference?" "My English teacher," Caleb said. "You signed up for both of you, remember?" Dad said he would go this time. For a second, Marianne just looked at him. Richard had told her there was a client emergency. He had sounded irritated when she reminded him about the meeting. He had made her feel unreasonable for expecting him to be in 2 places at once, like being a father was some extra favor she had requested too late. Caleb shrugged, like it did not matter. That shrug hurt more than anger would have. A child should not have to learn how to make disappointment look casual. Marianne told him she was sorry. She asked about the conference. She listened while he gave her the short version, the safe version, the one he thought would not upset her. Later, after Caleb went upstairs, Marianne opened the bank account. There it was. A restaurant charge for 2. Same evening. Same hour. Not near Richard's office. Not near Caleb's school. Downtown. Marianne sat at the kitchen table and stared at the number for a long time. She was not surprised anymore. Surprise had already burned itself out. What she felt was colder than surprise. Cleaner. More dangerous. Richard had not only skipped his son's school meeting, he had made Marianne feel guilty for expecting him to go. That was when the shape of the thing became clearer. This was not one mistake. Not one weak moment. Not one bad month in a long marriage. It was not stress. It was not business pressure. It was not a husband losing track of time. It was a system. And Marianne had been living inside that system without knowing its name. She did not have the whole truth yet. But she had enough to understand one thing with absolute certainty. If she confronted Richard too soon, he would not confess. He would erase. He would explain. He would deny. He would move money faster, hide accounts better, and turn every question into proof that she was unstable. He had already practiced that part. So Marianne did something Richard never expected from the woman he kept calling boring. She waited. After the declined spa charge in the grocery store, Marianne came home with 2 bags in each hand and a face that gave away nothing. Richard was in the living room, stretched across the couch, watching television like the whole world was still arranged for his comfort. He looked up just long enough to scan the groceries. "Did you forget the salad I like?" he asked. Not hello. Not do you need help. Not how was the store. The salad. Marianne set the bags on the counter. "I'll get it tomorrow," she said. That was all. No tremble in her voice, no accusation, no broken plate, no demand for honesty from a man who had spent months punishing her for asking smaller questions. Richard went back to the television. He had no idea that the woman putting milk in the refrigerator had just seen the first honest sentence in their marriage. It had not come from his mouth. It had come from a bank memo. "For our new place." Those 4 words followed Marianne all evening. They sat with her while she made Caleb's dinner. They stood beside her while Richard complained that the chicken was dry. They waited in the hallway while she folded towels. They lay down next to her in the dark while Richard slept easily beside her, breathing like a man who believed he had gotten away with something. After Caleb went to bed and Richard finally fell asleep, Marianne got up quietly. She sat at the small desk in the guest room. The house was dark except for the desk lamp. That little circle of light felt strange to her, almost holy. As if the truth had been waiting there the whole time, patient and ugly. She did not touch Richard's phone. She did not guess his passwords. She did not open anything private. Marianne had spent too many years being made to feel small for asking fair questions. She was not going to give Richard a real reason to call her reckless now. She logged into the joint bank account, the same account she had managed for years. The account that paid the mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, school costs, therapy invoices, repairs, and every ordinary expense Richard found too boring to understand until he wanted to control it. Then she started printing. The printer made soft mechanical sounds in the quiet room, page after page, month after month. 9 months of statements came out slowly, like the marriage was confessing 1 sheet at a time. The first pages looked normal. Mortgage, electric, grocery stores, gas, Caleb's therapy, school fees, pharmacy, insurance. Then came Vanessa Lane. Once Marianne had the name, the pattern sharpened. $1,850 every month for an apartment Marianne had never seen. $426 for a car lease. $312 for a phone bill. Salon charges. Boutique charges. Restaurants. Delivery services. Parking. Furniture. $600 one month. $900 the next. Then more. The money did not look like one mistake. It looked like maintenance. That was the word that made Marianne feel sick. Maintenance. Richard had not simply bought gifts for another woman. He had been maintaining her, keeping her comfortable, making sure her lights stayed on, her phone stayed active, her car stayed insured, and her life stayed pretty enough for him to escape into. And he had done it, while telling Marianne the family needed to cut back. Then there was the transfer. $7,500. Memo for our new place. Marianne read it again. Not his new place. Not business rental. Not client advance. Not temporary housing. Our new place. The word our did what the dollar amount could not. It told her Richard had not just been careless. He had been planning. He had built another life with money pulled from the one Marianne kept alive. The next morning, Richard performed the same tired play at the breakfast table. He rubbed his forehead and said they needed to be realistic about expenses. He said Caleb's therapy might have to move to every other week for a while. He said everyone needed to sacrifice. Marianne watched him butter toast while talking about sacrifice. Something inside her settled then. Not healed. Not softened. Settled. Richard was not broke. He was choosing. He chose Vanessa's apartment over his son's therapy. He chose Vanessa's car over Caleb's future car. He chose spa charges over the dishwasher. He chose restaurants over stability. He chose his secret life, then came home and asked Marianne to make the family smaller so he could afford it. That kind of betrayal does not always make a person scream. Sometimes it makes a person very, very calm. After Richard left for work, Marianne stood in the kitchen for a long minute. The house looked the same. Same counters, same coffee mugs, same stack of mail near the door, same old dishwasher waiting to be replaced. But nothing was the same anymore. She picked up her phone and called a divorce attorney named Patricia Grant. Patricia was 59, sharp, calm, and not easily impressed by pain. She had heard enough broken voices to know the difference between a woman who needed comfort and a woman who needed instructions. Marianne gave her the basics: the card, the spa, the apartment, the memo line. She expected shock, maybe sympathy, maybe that soft tone people use when they do not know what to say. Patricia did not give her any of that. She did not tell Marianne to confront him. She did not tell her to call Vanessa. She did not tell her to expose him online or burn his reputation down before lunch. She said, "Stay calm." That was the first useful sentence Marianne had heard in a long time. Then Patricia said something Marianne would remember for the rest of the case. According to how these matters are handled in your state, financial records can matter, but only if you collect them legally, preserve them properly, and do not let anger make your decisions. Marianne closed her eyes. There it was. Not revenge, not panic, a path. So she listened. Patricia told her not to access Richard's private accounts, not to follow Vanessa, not to post anything online, not to threaten anyone, not to empty accounts out of fear, not to cut off anything that could harm Caleb's stability. No dramatic moves, no dirty moves, no moves that would feel good for 1 hour and damage her in court for months. Patricia told Marianne to save what she had a legal right to see: joint bank records, shared credit card statements, household bills, tax returns, school emails, medical records, therapy invoices, messages from shared family devices, if they appeared naturally and were not obtained by breaking into anything. It was not glamorous advice. It was better than glamorous. It was useful. By the end of the call, Marianne had a folder on her desk and a legal pad beside it. At the top of the first page, she wrote one word: evidence. Not revenge, not rage, not Vanessa. Evidence. Because in a marriage like that, emotion could be twisted, tears could be mocked, anger could be used against her. Richard had already shown her how quickly he could turn a question into an accusation. But Numbers had a different kind of voice. Numbers did not care if Richard called her boring. Numbers did not care if he rolled his eyes. Numbers did not care if he said she did not understand real money. They just sat there, clean and patient, waiting for someone to read them out loud. And for the first time in a long time, Marianne was ready to let them speak. Patricia Grant did not let Marianne confuse pain with a plan. That was the first lesson. Hurt could explain why Marianne was sitting in a divorce attorney's office with bank statements in her purse. Hurt could explain why her hands still tightened every time she remembered that memo line. Hurt could explain why she barely slept next to Richard now, even when he was snoring 3 feet away like a man with no conscience. But Hurt would not protect Caleb. Hurt would not separate marital money from hidden spending. Hurt would not stand up in court and speak clearly when Richard tried to make Marianne look unstable. Patricia told her the truth in a voice so calm it almost sounded cold. "You are not here to punish him," she said. "You are here to protect yourself, your child, and what the law says you are entitled to." Marianne nodded, because speaking would have taken more strength than she had in that moment. The folder on Patricia's desk was already thicker than Marianne expected. 9 months of bank statements, shared credit card records, mortgage payments, insurance notices, tax returns, retirement contributions, bonus deposits. Every document had been collected from accounts Marianne had a legal right to access. Nothing stolen, nothing guessed, nothing pulled from Richard's private phone. That mattered. Patricia made it clear that discipline would be more useful than rage. so Marianne became disciplined. Every evening, after Caleb went to bed, she sat at the guest room desk and added to the file. She printed statements. She saved household bills. She copied tax documents. She marked every charge that had nothing to do with the family Richard claimed he was trying so hard to support. The numbers told a story Richard would have hated. There was the apartment under Vanessa Lane's name. There was the car lease. There were the salon charges, the restaurants, the parking garage, the furniture store, the second phone bill. There were cash withdrawals on nights Richard claimed he was working late. There were charges near hotels when he had told Marianne he was out of town for clients. And then Patricia found something Marianne had missed. A small company called Carter Consulting Solutions. At first, Richard had made it sound like a side project. Just paperwork. Just tax planning. Just something business people did. But the records showed money moving through it in a way that made Patricia's pen stop on the page. Part of Richard's bonus had not gone straight into the household account. It had moved into that LLC. From there, smaller payments had gone out under vague labels. Consulting, travel, client support. One of those payments matched a deposit on Vanessa's apartment. Patricia circled it once. "Do not ask him about this yet," she said. Marianne looked up. "Why?" "Because if he knows we see it, he may try to explain it before he has to document it." That sentence stayed with Marianne. For most of her marriage, she had asked Richard questions and received performances. Now, for the first time, she was learning not to ask before the paperwork was ready. The financial side was only one half of the case. The other half was Caleb. And that part made Marianne even colder inside, because Richard had started talking about custody before anyone had filed a single document. He did not say it like a father trying to protect his bond with his son. He said it like a man warning someone not to touch his wallet. The comments came casually at first, sharp little remarks, slipped into ordinary evenings. "If this ever goes bad," he said one night while Marianne was loading the dishwasher, "I'm not letting you take my son from me." My son. That was what stayed with her. Not our son. Not Caleb. My son. As if Caleb were something Richard had suddenly remembered he owned. Marianne kept her hands in the sink and said nothing. She had learned by then that Richard did not throw words away by accident. He placed them where he wanted them. Like markers. Like warnings. A week later, he said something worse. 50-50 is pretty standard now, he told her. So don't think you can use him to get money out of me. There it was. Clearer than any confession. Richard was not thinking about school mornings. He was not thinking about therapy appointments, groceries, homework, laundry, doctor visits, permission slips, or the quiet patience it takes to raise a 15-year-old boy who already knows more than he should about disappointment. Richard was thinking about child support. Patricia had warned Marianne this might happen. Some parents ask for time because they want the child. Others ask for time because they want the number on the support worksheet to go down. Richard was showing her which kind he was, so Marianne started keeping the record Richard had never bothered to keep. She saved emails from Caleb's teachers. She printed reminders from the pediatrician. She kept therapy invoices. She saved school conference notices. She kept copies of the messages where Richard canceled on Caleb because of work, then later charged a dinner downtown to the shared card. She wrote down the nights he missed. Not with rage, not with insults. Not in the language Richard could later call dramatic. Just dates. Times. What was supposed to happen. What actually happened. Patricia called it a parenting record. Marianne called it the truth nobody had ever cared enough to notice. Then the old family iPad changed everything. It was the one they kept in the kitchen drawer. Caleb used it when his laptop froze. Richard used it sometimes when his phone was charging. Marianne used it mostly to look up recipes, pay a bill, or clear storage when it started running slow. That evening, Caleb had complained that it kept freezing during a school assignment. Marianne sat at the kitchen counter and started deleting old downloads. She was not looking for Richard's secrets. That was the strange thing about secrets. Sometimes you do not need to hunt them. Sometimes they walk right onto the screen. A message preview appeared across the top. It was from one of Richard's friends. The line under Richard's name was short enough to read before she could even look away. If I get 50-50, she can't bleed me dry. Marianne's stomach went hollow. By then, very little Richard did could truly surprise her. But seeing it written down was different. Hearing a man hint at something over dinner was one thing. Seeing the thought spelled out in black and white was another. He had taken the language of fatherhood and turned it into a discount strategy. Caleb was not a child in that sentence. Caleb was leverage. Then she called Patricia before touching anything else. Patricia asked careful questions. Was it a shared family device? Did Marianne bypass a password? Was the message already visible? Had she opened a private account? Had she searched through anything that was not hers to access? Marianne answered honestly. Patricia told her what to do, and just as important, what not to do. She could preserve what had appeared naturally on a shared device, but she was not to go digging. No scrolling through private conversations. No hunting. No crossing lines that would give Richard a way to distract from his own behavior. So Marianne took one screenshot of what had already appeared, documented where it came from, and stopped. That was harder than people like to admit. When betrayal opens a door, every wounded part of you wants to kick it all the way in. You want to know everything. You want every name, every lie, every hour, every receipt. You want the whole ugly shape of it, because at least then you can stop wondering. But Patricia had trained her well. Evidence collected the wrong way can become a weapon against the person who needs protection most. So Marianne stopped. She put the iPad away, and she added the screenshot to the file. Then came the pregnancy. Richard did not tell Marianne gently. He did not sit down with shame in his eyes. He did not speak like a man who understood the damage he had done. He dropped it into an argument like a blade. Vanessa is pregnant, he said, and I need to move forward with my real family. For a second, the whole house seemed to go quiet. Marianne thought of Caleb upstairs. Caleb, whose therapy Richard wanted to cut. Caleb, whose school meetings Richard kept missing. Caleb, whose father now stood in the kitchen, using another unborn child as proof that he had outgrown the family he already had. There are moments when a woman's heart breaks so cleanly that it makes no sound. This was one of them. Richard watched her face, waiting for something. Tears, maybe. Screaming! A scene he could later describe to someone else as proof that Marianne was unstable. She gave him nothing. She only said, "You should tell your attorney that." Richard blinked. He looked almost disappointed. He had wanted collapse. He had wanted a reaction big enough to use. He had wanted the old Marianne, the one who would beg him to remember what they had built. But that version of her had been buried somewhere between the spa charge and the memo line. A few days later, while Patricia reviewed more statements, she found a payment that did not fit. It was listed as medical consulting. The amount was too specific. The clinic name was hidden behind a billing service. The label looked clean on purpose, the way some lies wear a pressed shirt. Patricia paused over it. Marianne noticed. "What is it?" she asked. Patricia circled the payment with her pen. "We are going to ask about this later," she said. That was all. Not now. Not before discovery. Not before Richard was legally required to explain what he had tried to make boring. Marianne had learned to trust that kind of patience. It was not passive. It was not weak. It was a locked door. And Patricia was waiting until Richard had to open it himself. While the records grew, Patricia helped Marianne separate her money carefully. Not emotionally. Legally. That difference mattered. Marianne did not empty the joint account. She did not stop paying for Caleb's food, his health insurance, his school needs, or the roof over his head. She did not create chaos and call it justice. That would have felt good for a day, and dangerous for months. Instead, she followed instructions. She opened an individual account for her own paycheck. She moved only the necessary household amount into the joint account. She stopped paying the extra card connected to Vanessa Lane. She stopped covering expenses that had nothing to do with the home, the mortgage, Caleb, or basic marital obligations. Through Patricia, she sent formal notice that she did not consent to marital funds being used for a third party. It was clean. It was careful. It was legal. And for Richard, it was devastating. He found out because Vanessa found out first. Her card was declined at a salon on a Friday afternoon. Not the family card. Not Marianne's card. The card Richard had quietly attached to a life Marianne had never agreed to support. Within 10 minutes, Vanessa called Richard. Within 12, Richard called Marianne. He did not begin with shame. Men like Richard rarely begin with shame when control starts slipping away. He began with anger. "What did you do to the account?" he snapped. Marianne was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee mug. Caleb was upstairs. The house was quiet in that thin, tense way a house gets when it knows a storm is nearby. She looked out the window at the backyard. The same yard she had paid to maintain. The same yard where Caleb had played when he was small. The same yard Richard had walked through every morning on his way to a life he pretended she was too simple to understand. For years, he had treated her patience like a blank check. Now, the check had been cancelled. Marianne answered him in a voice that did not shake. "I stopped paying for a life I was never invited into." Richard went silent for 1 full second. Just one. But it told Marianne everything. He had expected tears. He had expected shouting. He had expected confusion, guilt, panic, maybe even an apology from her for touching a system he had built behind her back. He had expected the old version of Marianne, the woman he could embarrass into backing down, the woman he could call suspicious until she apologized for noticing the truth. But that woman was gone. Richard thought Marianne was angry. Vanessa thought it was a banking problem. Neither of them understood that the money had not simply stopped. The mask had started coming off. The weeks after that were not peaceful. They were quieter than a screaming war, but quieter does not always mean easier. Vanessa started calling Richard more often. Sometimes late at night, sometimes during dinner, sometimes when he was standing in the garage with the door half closed, speaking in a low voice that carried just enough panic for Marianne to hear the shape of it. The apartment was late. The car lease needed attention. The phone bill was due. The salon had embarrassed her. Vanessa had believed Richard was a wealthy man, giving her a better life. What she had not understood was that the better life had been running through Marianne's discipline, Marianne's budget, Marianne's silence, and Marianne's joint account. Once that stopped, the fantasy started to wobble. Richard tried to patch it from other places. He moved money through accounts. He asked about a home equity line. He hinted that Marianne needed to sign some paperwork because it would be good for the family. He got irritated when she asked Patricia to review it first. That was the first time Richard truly understood that Marianne's silence no longer belonged to him. For years, he had used her steadiness like consent. If she did not object loudly, he assumed he could keep taking. But now, every request had to pass through a woman with a file and an attorney. And Richard hated that. He called her cold. He called her controlling. He said she was punishing him. He said she was trying to humiliate him. Marianne listened to him perform the way she had listened for years. Only now, she heard it differently. Before, his anger had made her shrink. Now, it made her take notes. Every time he canceled on Caleb, she wrote it down. Every time he demanded money without explaining where it was going, she saved the message. Every time he tried to frame himself as the victim of her financial control, Patricia added another document to the file. Patricia called the folder the pattern. Marianne thought that was perfect. Because that was what it was. Not one affair, not one charge, not one bad decision. A pattern. A pattern of using marital money for another woman. A pattern of cutting his son's needs while funding Vanessa's comfort. A pattern of hiding income. A pattern of calling Marianne unstable whenever she stood close to the truth. Then discovery began. That was when Richard's polished confidence started to crack. The LLC was no longer just a vague business project. Carter Consulting Solutions had to be explained. The bonus money had to be traced. The consulting payments had to be identified. The transfers had to be matched against dates, invoices, and statements. Richard did not enjoy that. Men who live by fog do not like paperwork. Under pressure, more came out. A portion of his bonus had been moved into the LLC before divorce papers were even filed. From there, payments went to accounts and services connected to Vanessa. Some were marked consulting. Some were marked travel. Some were vague enough to insult everyone's intelligence. But Patricia did not argue with Richard's labels. She followed the money. And the money did what Richard never had the courage to do. It told the truth. Then came the medical consulting payment, the one Patricia had circled weeks earlier. When Patricia requested records related to it, Richard tried to fight the request. He said it was private. He said it was irrelevant. He said Marianne was trying to embarrass him. Patricia stayed calm. Eventually, The document had to be produced. It was not medical consulting. It was a prenatal DNA test. And the result was the kind of truth that does not need much decoration. The baby Vanessa was carrying was not Richard's. For a long moment, Marianne did not say anything when Patricia told her. She looked at the paper, then at the window, then back at the paper. Not because it made the betrayal less painful. It did not. Richard had still betrayed her. He had still drained their money. He had still tried to make Caleb smaller, so Vanessa could live larger. But there was something almost cruelly perfect about it. Richard had used another woman's pregnancy as a weapon. He had told Marianne he needed to move forward with his real family. He had stood in the kitchen of the home Marianne maintained and tried to make her feel replaced. And the child he used to justify all of it was not even his. That was karma with a straight face. Marianne did not go to Vanessa. She did not send the result to anyone. She did not throw papers, make calls, or perform the kind of revenge people imagine when they are still angry enough to need an audience. She waited for Richard to come home. When he walked in, he looked tired in a way Marianne had not seen before. Not work tired, cornered tired. "We need to talk like adults," he said. That almost made Marianne smile. Adults. After months of lies, hidden money, missed appointments, and another woman's bills paid from a marriage account, Richard had discovered adulthood. Marianne sat at the kitchen table. She placed 3 documents in front of him. The bank memo for our new place, the LLC payment records, and the DNA invoice. Not the full result, not yet. Just enough to let him understand that the door he thought was locked had already been opened. Richard stared at the papers. The color shifted in his face. Marianne watched him realize, piece by piece, that she had not been confused. She had not been paranoid. She had not been too boring to notice. She had been quiet. There is a difference. Richard's first reaction was not remorse. It was anger. That disappointed her less than it should have. Maybe because, by then, she knew him too well. He called her cold. He called her calculating. He said she had been waiting to destroy him. He said a good wife would have talked to him instead of building a case. Marianne let him finish. Then she said, "No, Richard. I was patient. You just confused patience with ignorance. Not one that mattered." The real answer came later, in the only room where Richard could not charm his way around the truth. Divorce court. Richard walked in trying to look like the reasonable man, the successful man, the father who only wanted equal time with his son, the husband unfairly punished by a bitter wife who had become obsessed with money. He had practiced that role. You could tell. His posture was calm. His voice was controlled. He spoke about fairness, stability, and moving forward. He said Marianne had always been anxious about finances. He said she had tried to control him with the accounts. He said she had made co-parenting difficult before it even began. Patricia did not argue with his feelings. She opened the file. That was the beautiful thing about Patricia. She did not waste time wrestling with Richard's performance. She let the paper interrupt him. First came the marital account records. The apartment under Vanessa Lane's name. The additional card. The spa charges. The restaurants. The car lease. The phone bill. The furniture. Then came the memo line. For our new place. Richard shifted in his chair when that appeared. Not much. Just enough. Then Patricia moved to Carter Consulting Solutions. The bonus money, the transfers, the vague payments, the timing, the way income seemed to become less visible right when divorce became more likely. Richard tried to explain. Of course he did. Men like Richard always explain. They explain until the room runs out of oxygen. But explanations are not the same as records. Patricia showed the custody file next. Caleb's school emails, therapy invoices, medical appointments, teacher conferences, the dates Richard canceled, the nights he missed, the restaurant charge from the same evening he skipped Caleb's English conference. Then came the message from the shared family iPad. If I get 50-50, she can't bleed me dry. The room went still around that sentence. Richard's attorney tried to soften it, tried to call it frustration, tried to make it sound like one ugly comment in a stressful time. But Patricia had built the pattern carefully. By then, the message did not stand alone. It stood beside every missed appointment, every canceled plan. Every time Richard used fatherhood as a position, but not a responsibility. Richard tried one more time to make Marianne look small. She did not understand financial pressure. He said she had never handled real business decisions. He said she had turned normal marital stress into a campaign against him. Patricia looked down at the file, then back at him. Then why did she understand your accounts better than you expected?
Richard had no good answer.
The court did not strip him of being Caleb's father. Marianne had never asked for that. Caleb deserved a father who showed up, if Richard ever chose to become one. But the court also did not let Richard use custody as a financial trick. Caleb's primary residence stayed with Marianne. Richard received a clear visitation schedule. Child support was calculated based on income Richard could no longer hide behind vague business labels. The LLC money was considered. The hidden spending mattered. The marital funds used for Vanessa did not simply vanish because Richard wished they would. A portion of the money had to be accounted for in a division. Some of the attorney fees landed where they belonged. On Richard. Not because Marianne cried louder, because the records were clearer. Vanessa did not last long after that. Once the apartment was no longer being quietly maintained, the rent became real. Once the car lease was no longer magically handled, the calls started. Once the DNA result destroyed the story Richard had been telling himself, Vanessa stopped speaking about fate and started speaking about what he could still provide. And when the answer became not much, she left. That part was almost predictable. Richard had mistaken dependence for devotion. Then he was shocked when dependence left after the money did. By the time the divorce was finalized, Richard had lost the clean version of himself. Not publicly in some dramatic scandal. Not with crowds watching. Just in the places that mattered. In court. In the records. In Caleb's eyes. And finally, in Marianne's memory of him. After the divorce, Marianne did not move into some perfect new life. There was no mansion waiting. No dramatic makeover. No sudden fortune that made every wound disappear. She moved into a smaller townhouse on the other side of town. It had narrow stairs, older kitchen cabinets, and the backyard barely big enough for 2 chairs and a small table. The dining room was not really a dining room. It was a corner near the window where she and Caleb ate dinner most nights. But it was quiet. And quiet, after a marriage like that, feels almost luxurious. There were no late-night arguments about money, no phone face down on the counter. No strange charges appearing under names she did not recognize. No husband walking through the door with another woman's life still clinging to his clothes. For the first time in years, the house felt honest. Caleb's schedule became steady again. His therapy continued. His school emails came to Marianne, and Richard's visitation days were written clearly into the custody order. There was no guessing, no begging, no waiting by the window for a father who might remember to show up. Marianne went back to bookkeeping for more hours. Then, she earned a better position at a local company that needed someone careful with numbers. That almost made her laugh. Richard had spent years telling her she did not understand real money. In the end, her understanding of money was exactly what saved her. The bills were in her name now. The account was hers. Every payment had a purpose. Nobody was quietly bleeding it for apartments, salons, hotel bars, or another woman's phone bill. It was not glamorous, but for Marianne, it was freedom. Richard's life became smaller too, but not in the peaceful way hers did. He rented a room in a house owned by a man from work. He paid child support based on income he could no longer hide. He paid legal bills he had created with his own arrogance. His reputation at the company never fully recovered after the financial records became part of the divorce. People did not need every detail. They only needed enough to understand that Richard Carter was not as clean as he liked to appear. Vanessa disappeared almost as quickly as the money did. Once the apartment was gone. Once the car lease collapsed. Once the DNA result destroyed the little fantasy Richard had built around her pregnancy. She stopped speaking about destiny and started speaking about survival. Then she stopped speaking to Richard at all. 6 months after the divorce, the messages started. The first one was careful. I made mistakes. Marianne read it while drinking coffee before work. Then she closed the phone. A week later, another message came. We should talk for Caleb's sake. But Caleb was doing better than he had in years. That was the part Richard still did not understand. Peace had helped his son more than any speech about family ever had. Then Richard's tone changed. I'm falling behind. Marianne did not answer. The last message came on a Friday afternoon. I need $800 by tonight, or I'm going to lose the room. You always knew how to fix things. Marianne stood in her small kitchen and read that sentence twice. Caleb was in the living room doing homework. The dishwasher hummed quietly behind her. A bill sat on the counter, already paid. Outside, evening settled over the little backyard, plain and peaceful. She thought about Vanessa's apartment, the memo line, the missed therapy appointments, the way Richard had called her boring and too small to understand the life he wanted. Then she understood what his message really meant. He did not miss her. He missed being rescued. He missed the woman who could stretch $1 until it covered his irresponsibility. He missed the wife who made his life look stable while he treated her like an obstacle. He missed the quiet labor, the paid bills, the repaired damage, the soft landing he had mistaken for weakness. So Marianne typed one word: no. Not because she hated him, not because she wanted him to suffer, but because she had finally learned that peace is also an answer. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop paying for the life that broke her. If this story reminded you of a red flag people often ignore, leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about betrayal, divorce, custody battles, evidence, and the quiet moments when people take their power back, subscribe. I'll see you in the next story.